there's all these stories about, guys over in Macedonia who are running these fake news sites.
Number 24 is Content Farms in Macedonia.
Бидејќи ако се направи грешка, таа ќе биде кобна. Нема враќање назад.
So Europe need to remain more sexy lady in the world.
Ајде, мајката!
Господа ја чува Македонија и низините граѓани.
The Prime Minister of Kosovo, Albin Kurti, comes to Macedonia, and you'd never know it was Macedonia by looking at pictures on TV and social media. Not a single Macedonian flag in sight, but there was a flag with Greater Albania on it. Accusations have flown back and forth, and we'll see what happens next. In other developments, the U.S. ambassador, Angela Aguilar, lies on TV during an interview about how, quote, the citizens of this country have a history of making difficult decisions for the good of the people of the country, unquote. That's a lie. The citizens said no to the name change. Her predecessor, Jess Bailey, together with the government of Ali Ahmeti and Zoran Zaev, and together with the U.S. State Department and the entire EU apparatus, all worked together to override the Lockean consent of the governed to change the name and identity. Sticking with the U.S. ambassador, she is now campaigning heavily for the government to change the constitution. One more time, wink wink, to give in to Bulgarian demands. We'll discuss all of this and more on this episode of the Macedonian Content Farmers Podcast. I'm Jason Miko, coming to you from the foot of the Catalina Mountains in Oro Valley, Arizona.
And this is Cvetin in Skopje, Macedonia.
Cvetin, how are you? It's been over a month since we talked last.
Well, this is Europe. We have to take our vacations, then pre-vacation, post-vacation. We need to go rest from our vacation.
Rest from your vacation, exactly. Yes, I was actually. I know you were on the road. I was in Estonia and Latvia for a little bit, and then doing a little bit other travel here around the great state of Arizona.
I was just in Macedonia. I never left Macedonia, but yeah, I did cross a bunch of borders.
Oh dear. Well, I hope you had an enjoyable time. So.
Yeah, it was nice with
good.
the heat wave, but don't let me talk about heat waves to a desert rat like you.
Exactly. Yeah, I could get into it, but this is the Macedonian Content Farmers Podcast, not the Macedonian weather, an Arizona weather Content Farmers Podcast. So, anyway, yes, while we've been happily vacationing here, there, and everywhere, life still goes on in Macedonia, and we've got.
If you call this life.
I do, yes. Right. So, yeah, there's the good and the bad, but anyway, life goes on, and so over the weekend, and this is episode 159, I believe, of the Macedonian Content Farmers Podcast, and we're recording this on Monday, August 14. But over the weekend, it was Albin Kurti, the Prime Minister of Kosovo, who came to Macedonia and he came to Tetovo. And basically,
it was in Albanian part of
in Chire. In Chire.
Yeah.
Tetovo in Chire. Didn't meet with any ethnic Macedonian politicians, all with Ali Ahmeti and the other various parties, flags of Albania, Greater Albania, things like that. Then there was the renaming of a street after Adam Damaci, and we can talk a little bit about that in a minute. But anyway, there's been a lot of criticism of him for this. When was the Osmani, the president of Kosovo in Macedonia? That was the spring, I believe.
It was a few months ago, yeah.
Yeah, I think it was in the spring.
She also had a meeting with all the Albanian mayors in Macedonia, very clearly hinting at the attempt to create a Serbian community of municipalities in Kosovo. Have all the majority Serbian municipalities put in kind of like a political entity. So she did the same to Macedonia.
Right. Yeah. So we've got now. Yeah, within the space of a few months, we've got two senior politicians from Kosovo coming over to Macedonia, meeting exclusively with ethnic Albanians in Macedonia, not meeting with any of the state leadership. Flags of
Osmani had like a more official visit, but she did have this very strong, very active pan-Albanian element to the meeting as well, to the visit as well.
Right. Yeah, and this is deliberate, of course. This is not an accident or anything like that. Yeah. It sends bad signals all the way around, and and there's absolute silence from, I mean, the U.S. Embassy and the EU Embassy and other EU member states are always happy to speak their mind when it comes to making Macedonians change their constitution, or saying something nasty about VMRO and the right, or criticizing the Macedonian Orthodox Church for standing up for what has been all of human history until about 5 minutes ago, which is the marriages between a man and a woman. So they're all happy to talk about this when one of those things happen. But when there's this subtle hints at Greater Albania or Kosovo meddling in Macedonia.
We're not even that subtle.
Yeah, they don't say a bloody word. So their silence speaks for them, I think. So
Kurti is just profiling himself as a nationalist, and this was on the anniversary of the Ohrid Treaty, his visit. It was also at the time when this faction from Dui created its own party. They all obviously timed the creation of the new party with the Ohrid Treaty. So there were the opposition leaders of the Albanians in Macedonia. So the Besa party, the newly formed Democratic Initiative Party, which became from by breaking up Dui, breaking up a small portion of Dui, and the Alternative Party. So these were all coalition partners of Zaev, coalition partners of Ahmeti, part of Ahmeti's party, but they decided to go their separate ways because they see how lucrative being in power with SDSM is, that you can ask for everything and anything and you can probably get it. So everybody's forming his own party, don't want to go through Ahmeti as an intermediary, but they want to run their own show. All the Albanian politicians are doing this. So there was a very active political period in the Albanian camp, and Kurti was here to practically express his support for the opposition Albanian parties in Macedonia, because he definitely considers Dui, he considers SDSM to be very close to Edi Rama, the Prime Minister of Albania, who is now in open fight with Kurti, the Prime Minister of Kosovo. They are now openly arguing over who will be the leader of the Albanians in the region. And so the division is that Edi Rama has the Western support, the Soros support, he has the US diplomats supporting him, and because of this he has Dui and SDSM in Macedonia supporting him, while Kurti is like a rebellious, like a counter-revolution type of a person, and he is now getting the support in Macedonia of the opposition parties.
That's a very good explanation and a very good kind of quick dive into the various personalities and who's on whose side, etc. in the region. And we know that it was recently that Kurti got spanked by the Western powers in Kosovo, and of course all the leftists on Twitter came to his defense, which I thought was interesting. But he's still there. This is his second stint, I think, as prime minister, right?
He was once under Trump,
right,
if I'm not mistaken, and there was a push through Grenell to have him fired. So even the hopelessly opposition, hopelessly non-establishment Trump administration was on the same page with the now deep state Balkan hands, both trying to remove Kurti from power. And this was a nationalist display. They had this map, which Albanians will say technically does not mean a map of Greater Albania. It's just a map of where ethnic Albanians live. But the fact that you draw it out and you say autochthonous, we are native to this land, even when this singer, what was her name? The famous singer.
Dua Lipa?
Dua Lipa, yeah. Dua. Like we're really going too deep into Macedonian politics. It's affecting our brains.
It is. Oh dear.
Yeah. So when she does it, it's seen clearly as a threat, and let alone when an organized political movement does it. But this is like a typical Albanian event. Some of those opposition Albanian leaders today told Macedonians, like, do not imagine that when we are having a party, a celebration, that we will be singing your anthem, the Macedonian anthem.
Well, that was the alternative party that had a statement saying that we're never going to sing the Macedonian national anthem. So
yeah, it was today.
Yeah,
and we don't really want them to, honestly, and even though I have objections to the anthem as well. But,
well, I mean, this is. Go ahead.
Yeah, so this is something that normally would happen, but the thing is that there is a move from Mickovski, obviously, from VMRO, to balance out the fact that SDSM is very likely going to create, already have a coalition with DUI, going to presidential elections together, to local elections. They brought on board another large Albanian party, which was supposed to be in the opposition, the Alliance of Albanians, and they're openly talking about creating a pre-election coalition for the general elections, which will be the first time such large parties like SDSM and DUI are in a pre-election coalition, which could easily, cost VMRO a very clear and likely victory in the next elections. So VMRO is trying to get on board with the Albanian opposition. At the moment, BESA. Before that, they worked very hard on bringing Taravari on board, the Alliance of Albanians, before they joined the government. So VMRO is trying to get with the Albanian opposition, but as usual, the Albanian opposition is the more nationalist of the Albanian factions. The party in power tries to be more moderate, not to embarrass too much its coalition partner, even though we are not really trying that hard. Do not care that much about if SDSM are perceived as weak and feckless. But always the opposition is more nationalist. So now VMRO has an issue that while they're trying to form a coalition with parties, and these parties are throwing a nationalist rager in Tetovo and in Chair, where they renamed a street named after a Macedonian partisan unit from the Second World War, with the name of a non-objectional, like a moderate Kosovo dissident intellectual writer who fought for, who wrote about and called for Kosovo independence, spent a lot of time in Serbian prisons, and is seen as the like a political paternal figure to Albin Kurti. This is Adam Demaci.
Right.
So VMRO is now SDSM is obviously in the most trouble because they're in power and they're allowing all this crap to happen in the country. People obviously associate the power, the government, with not being able to, limit, to negotiate with whenever a different nation, different country is organizing an event. The government should be able to tell them, let's not make it so vulgar and aggressively nationalist in your face, like a rager. But SDSM is trying to respond by saying, well, look, but these people are trying to form a coalition. VMRO is trying to form a coalition with these guys. They're VMRO's coalition partners. VMRO helps them electorally. So, but everybody is putting aside the fact that this happens and at the DUI events as well. If Kurti is a nationalist, so DUI on one hand, DUI have this Albanian nationalist street gang, football fans called Shvirceri, the smugglers, in Skopje, who support the Albanian teams from Skopje, which are doing exceptionally well under the DUI SDSM government, who recently stabbed a Bulgarian fan when their team Shkupi was playing Levski from Sofia. So they practically had 2 cars of Bulgarians driving through Chair. They were probably like waving flags and honking, and a bunch of 20 Albanians descend on them and stabbed one of the Bulgarians just for driving through Chair on match day. Right? And this gang is directly linked to the Deputy Prime Minister Artan Grubi. He's like the leader of this group. And then at the same time we have Edi Rama, who is now the moderate, the decent, Albanian leader, who He has a mural of Greater Albania in his office.
Oh yes.
Not just like a flag at a rally. Who made the Tirana platform, which brought SDSM into power, so did a lot more practical work on the ground to create Greater Albania and to harm Macedonian interests than Kurti ever did. But this guy, he's close with Soros, he's close with the US diplomats, he's close with SDSM. So his actions are being ignored while Kurti is being portrayed as the nationalist. It probably fits a lot of public relation interests at the moment to make it look so, but it's stupid. It's stupid to say that Kurti is the nationalist while the other guys are all right.
Yes, yeah. Well, a couple of points on that. That's a good explanation there as well. You mentioned the Tirana platform and Edi Rama and the mural of Greater Albania. It's worth reminding our listeners that so-called platform, the Tirana platform, was publicly released on January 7, which of course is Orthodox Christmas. And I think that was a deliberate move on their part, a kind of a thumb in the eye of Orthodox Christians.
A few days after the visit of John Brennan, the CIA director, to Tirana.
Oh, yes. He can't die soon enough, can
Remember
he?
him?
He's still around, I know. It still pops up on the CNN. And
Still on CNN.
thoroughly nasty, despicable individual who, it is worth reminding our listeners on that accord, his first, when he was a younger man, his first vote in the presidential elections, I think it was the late 60s, early 70s, was for the Communist Party of the United States of America, whoever the candidate was at that
But give
time.
them a chance. Give these guys a chance, maybe.
Oh, yeah. Well, yes. So, your point about the nationalists, in whether it's Kurti is seen as the nationalist, whereas Edi Rama and the others are seen as, pretty decent, good guys. Yeah, they all are. And when it comes to VMRO and electoral politics in Macedonia, and maybe we can kind of pivot to the elections, Bulgaria, the constitution, etc. VMRO obviously feels that it needs to have an Albanian party partner in government, and no matter who they court, to your point that they're all nationalists in Macedonia in terms of the ethnic Albanian minority parties, they're all nationalists. It's always going to be that way unless Macedonians can finally put aside some of their differences and work together for the good of Macedonia, which benefits all of Macedonia's citizens, no matter what their ethnicity is. Again, I make this point time and time again that say what you will about SDSM and VMRO, no matter which side you're on, they at least have platforms, worldviews, ideologies. The Albanian parties in Macedonia have their only worldview, ideology, platform is anything that benefits ethnic Albanians is good. We don't have an economic platform. We don't have a social policy platform. Our foreign policy platform is oriented towards any Albanians in the region. They don't have a bloody thought in their heads. It's all based on state jobs for ethnic Albanians, number one, which is stupid. You don't grow the economy or create wealth in that way. At least SDSM has a platform based on a socialist left of center ideology. VMRO, of course, is a market ideology, which is the better ideology, this being a conservative podcast. So, but anyway, VMRO is going to, feels that they have to, and maybe they do, but Macedonians have the keys to the kingdom in their hands. They just have to, SDSM has to, give up some of this infatuation with power and always caving in to the demands of others and get with the program.
Hey, careful what you wish for there, because we're getting to this point. So it's pretty clear by now that there is a division in SDSM, the Kovacevsky wing, and it's not clear who also belongs to this wing. Probably the pro-international, the ones the party officials who stand more closely with the internationals, with the U.S., maybe Shekerinsky and Cervenkovsky. They're talking about forming a permanent coalition with the DUI, with the Alliance of Albanians, maybe like a permanent left minority, left Albanian coalition, the types of the coalitions you have in the U.S. with the left and the blacks and the browns, or in the UK with the left and the minorities, etc. But the Zaev wing is now pretty open in proposing exactly what you described, that VMRO and SDSM get together, that they support each other after elections. They don't form a coalition, but whoever wins, the other Macedonian party supports the winner, maybe gets some of the spoils, and helps the winner be able to form a coalition, not with DUI, or maybe with a weaker Albanian party, or even if it's DUI, at least, like under Gruevski, keep them under some kind of wraps. Don't give them the keys to the kingdom. Just give them a reasonable, if they're 25% of the population, give them 25, or if they're like 25% of parliament, give them 25% of government. That currently Albanians hold half of the government, and and increasing number of high quality seats, stronger seats. So it's you could even argue that the Albanian seats in government are on average stronger than the Macedonian ones. So this is what Zaev is proposing, and do we, I don't know, do we forgive him? Do we forget everything he's done just because he's currently not in power in his own party, and he's crapping on all his stated goals that he will, his concessions will usher in a new era of brotherly relations between Macedonians and Albanians, and all that waving of intertwined Macedonian and Albanian flags during the Colored Revolution, which all led to, that bogus vote in 2016 when Albanians very curiously and strangely decided to vote for SDSM just to, or were told by somebody to vote SDSM just to bring down VMRO. They never did vote SDSM again. They never did vote SDSM before. So, this is what Zaev is proposing. He's trying to be the patriotic guy, while he's getting in more and more trouble with his own party. There was possibly a move against one of his closest people now, former healthcare minister Venko Filipče. They're inseparable. They're like Dumb and Dumber now. They're vacationing together. You can see them.
Funny, I saw that over the weekend.
There were some pictures of Filipče driving Zaev through Greece, just like in the movie. Or
how funny!
So there was a documentary on IRL, which is a very left, very Soros style, SDSM style news outlet, like an investigative news outlet, which has been used recently to extort money from businessmen. They did a hit job on Jean Mitrov, the cardiologist who runs this large
I remember that.
public turned private clinic for which was providing obviously COVID assistance to people, and they did like a report that Jean Mitrov was mistreating the patients and that many died and he was overcharging them, blah blah blah. And this is all coordinated with the prosecutors. Just after this TV show runs, prosecutors go into the hospital. A few months later, Mitrov sells the hospital allegedly to Albanian businessman, and he's still facing charges, but will probably be allowed to walk away once he sold his hospital to somebody, we assume, close to the people who were giving instructions to do this news item, this investigative report. And yesterday there was another about the dreadful hospital fire in 21? 21. When we were on the day when we were celebrating the 30th anniversary of our independence, on September 8th, when I think 14 people died in the fire, and nobody was seriously charged. There were minor penalties for the director of the hospital, and all blame was laid on the faulty wire cable for electricity, but the hospital was built under Filipče, the healthcare minister, by Kočo and Jushev, Zaev's former deputy prime minister for economy, who has a construction company for prefab structures. And Filipče was allegedly giving the order to build the hospital using, he did not demand non-flammable materials to be used, and then Jushev was happy to oblige and build it under the specifications. So if this investigative report turns into something more, turns into a prosecution for Filipče, then we can see that the government would make its first serious move to attack Zaev and defeat this idea that Zaev makes a grand deal with VMRO, which would put the Albanians back in their place. And I'm sure the US would be happy to see this happen, because the US made this huge deal, highway deal with DUI, not with SDSM, but with DUI, and why would they renegotiate a perfectly done deal, which will end up having all the diplomats in the embassy and the doorman and the security people buy a house in Bethesda once it's all finished. So,
yes. Well, I mean, let's remember that this current government came out of the colorful revolution, so-called, and it's always worth repeating that the revolution always devours its own. So Zaev, thought that once he was in power, he would, force the name and identity change and go on to greater and greater things. Nikola Dimitrov thought the same thing, and of course, they're both out of power now. Everybody's out, of power from except for Ali Ahmeti, yes, who. Going back to what I said earlier about their ideology and worldview and whatnot, I have to make a correction to what I said. Ali Ahmeti, at least, is a committed Marxist-Leninist, Stalinist. That's what he studied at university, and combined with his psychotic disorders, mental disorders, has proven that the whole ideology around Leninism, Marxism, Stalinism is to stay in power and use brutal means to stay in power. And that is exactly what he's done. He is the only chairman that Dewey has ever known, and he's been there for 21 years now, I think. So, 2001 was the end of the war. 2002 was the formation of Dewey, I believe. He's, it's like Mahmoud Abbas in Palestine, so-called, has been there forever. And that's what Marxism, Leninism, Stalinism is all about. It's about getting power and hanging on to power, and then doling out, your to those your favorites. So, speaking of power and all this, we got elections. So we got parliamentary elections. Theoretically, would be in a normal year. When normal schedule would be this time next year, roughly. Is that correct?
Yeah. One is in April, I think, the presidential.
Yeah.
And then the general should be in the summer. And
But there's talk of combining.
SDSM is fighting to split them because they count that they may win the presidential with Albanian votes, and that this would give them a push for the general. VMRO wants them all unified together. It's still not clear who would run in which capacity. So Oliver Spasovski is pushing for the presidential. Shekerinska might be in the wings. Pendarovski obviously wants a second term. While, if this rapprochement between Mickovsky and Zaev continues, VMRO might, even let Zaev, maybe help Zaev in some way be the nominee, or maybe even let him win if he manages to muscle in on the nomination. So let him win the presidency while he helps them break SDSM up and win the general. So there's a lot of craziness around.
Yeah, and plenty of time to discuss it. But before we get there, we need to talk about what's going to happen this week and what U.S. Ambassador Angie Aguilar has been pushing for, along with David Greer, the EU ambassador, etc. And that is the so-called the constitutional changes that Bulgaria demands, and the EU and the U.S. and NATO and everybody else supports. So this Friday, let's see, today's Monday the 14th, Friday the 18th is when the Parliament opens up discussion. Now the amendments have already been written, correct?
Yeah, it's just like they only submitted like a typical technical, like a minor change. Where we have the Serbs, the Turks, the Albanians, everybody mentioned in the constitution, it's just like comma, and you add the Bulgarians, Croats, Slovenes, Montenegrins, Egyptians.
What about my people? My people,
Hungarians.
Are we going to be in there? Okay.
The Shekeli are all Hungarians.
The Transylvanians, those are also my people.
Arizonians too. We have the flag looks like the one of Arizona.
Yeah. So anyway, so that's supposed to happen. Angie was on one of the TV stations this weekend, I think, giving an interview, and in which, as I mentioned in the monologue, of course, she lied. Old twist. Old joke, new twist. How do you know that Angie, the U.S. ambassador, is lying? Yeah. Her lips are moving. Ba-dum-bum. Okay. Yeah, so you said, the citizens of this country have a history of making difficult decisions for the good of the country. Well, the citizens made a decision in 2018, and that was to not back the referendum. Yeah. They boycotted it. It failed, and yet the government, together with the U.S. ambassador, Jess Bailey, and the EU, and NATO, etc., pushed it through anyway with their Johannes Balkan Tactics Han tactics. Johannes Balkan Tactics Han. That's it. So now they're doing it again, and we're gonna see if they use the same tactics to get this through. What's the current? If you're counting votes, what's the current?
So they lost Pavle Trajanov from their count. They lost the Turkish member of SDSM of Parliament, Turkish party. He said he's not voting in favor because the amendments, actually there is a commission in Parliament which decides which laws will be voted on with this double majority, which includes the minority, and this includes Serbs, Turks, this committee, and now to accommodate the other minorities. So the Turkish representation is reduced to make room for the Bulgarians, the Croats, the Montenegrins. So he said he's not voting. So SDSM lost 2 votes. One of the Albanian members of parliament, I think from Besa, he said he's not voting on nationalist grounds. He wants Macedonia made fully bilingual country, that the Albanian is made fully official language. So they're losing votes. These are weak losses. I mean, the Albanian, the Turk will probably team up with the government in the end, but they still would need like 8, I think at least 8 VMRO people need to be bribed, blackmailed or something.
Arrested.
Yeah, and VMRO has been making a lot of proposals. They said like they offered to form a new coalition which would try to renegotiate the deal after Zaev's masterful negotiations the last time, accepting everything Bulgaria wants from the outset. VMRO said, let's have this without DUI. So there was a lot of maneuvering. DUI announced their resignations from the government. They say, okay, we met the VMRO demand, but we're only resigning if VMRO votes for the amendments as they are immediately, which is obviously very contrary to what VMRO asked for. So SDSM and DUI are trying to pretend like they accepted the VMRO demands without accepting the key demands, the key fact that VMRO rejects the amendment. They just say, okay, we accept everything, you just vote for the amendment. And VMRO said from the start, we're not voting for this. So VMRO also said, okay, let's have a gesture of goodwill from Bulgaria. Let's have them recognized one of the groups, or several of the groups maybe, of Macedonians in southwestern Bulgaria, in Pirin, Macedonia, who are, Bulgarian citizens applying for recognition of a cultural organization, which is statedly Macedonian, just like, Macedonian citizens who are Bulgarians are creating clubs in Macedonia and, set up their clubs, etc. So our government is now shutting down the Bulgarian clubs because they used names which we find offensive, like Vancho Mikhailov, because of collaboration with the Nazis in World War II. And there is very little chance that Bulgaria would accept something like this, that the Bulgarians would recognize, have their courts recognize one of our clubs. But Mickovsky is asking for this. Just like give us some gesture of goodwill so we may be able to vote on this. Hopefully after the elections, after we win the elections, give us a gesture, and you have a new government, you have a member of European Commission as foreign minister. She's not supposed to be nationalist. You have a member of these liberal US-style colorful new parties like PP and DB, the modern new hip guys. One of them is like a prime minister, so he's not supposed to be nationalist. So give us something. And Aguilar was out in this interview, you saw it, and she was mocking Mickovsky. And the journalist asked her, okay, Mickovsky asked for this, is it too much? Could you ask the Bulgarians to do it? Shouldn't the Bulgarians do it anyway? And she says, well, I'll let the professor explain this. Professor Mickovsky explain how he thinks this could happen. So she was very openly pushing VMRO to accept just vote for this, and get nothing out of it.
Yeah, I mean, I went on Twitter after that because it made me mad, and I'm still going to call it Twitter, by the way, and not X.
And we call Macedonia Macedonia, not North Macedonia.
We never use the N-word. We don't use the N-word there or here.
Or the X-word.
Or the X-word, right. She's a condescending narcissist is what the U.S. ambassador is. But all U.S. ambassadors are condescending narcissists. That's how they get to their position in the first place. It's actually a requirement. It's on this checklist that U.S. ambassadors go through before they're appointed as U.S. ambassador. So, yeah. Are you a condescending narcissist? Yes, check. All right, you're that much closer to becoming a U.S. ambassador.
Looks like it.
It's just kind of anyway. Yeah, so she's actively pushing for this. David Gear, is it Gear or Greer? I always get it mixed up.
Gear, I guess.
The guy with the
requirement for the EU ambassador is be a homosexual Irishman. We're on our second, and I think it's been decades since we had a non-openly gay, maybe just closeted gay EU ambassador would be a change for us at this point.
Well, the next EU ambassador will be trans. So they have to step up their game.
Yeah, you're right. They should be careful.
Sending gay ambassadors to represent the EU is.
Yeah. Now it's the norm. Now they have to try something.
Well, at least it's not. At least it's not as bad as Hungary and the State Department, because the State Department makes sure to send a Hungary, not just a gay ambassador, but a gay ambassador with a husband, and a male ambassador with a husband and children. Those poor kids.
Yeah.
Poor kids.
They're like props for the embassy.
Yeah. That's what it's all about.
For their political career. That's the. Hopefully nothing worse.
Yeah, it's for their political career. Yeah. Yes, indeed. So anyway, that's the. We're gonna be monitoring that.
I mean, they knew this is going to happen. They were not so stupid. They knew VMRO will not vote for this. They went. The Americans and the State Department and the government. They knew after all that happened in Prispa, and by now I think it's pretty clear that the way they were handling these negotiations between Mickovsky and Kovachevsky, it's clear that all they want is for VMRO to vote in some way, to be pressured enough by the internationals or blackmailed to vote for this. They deliberately chose like a condition that would repeat the disaster of the Prespa vote in Parliament, just so that afterwards they would be able to say, look, all these parties are the same. They talk a big talk, but look, they are all going to make the same concessions. So I think it's pretty clear that this is all deliberate. We're deliberately heading toward another Prespa outcome.
Oh, definitely, yeah, and it's I'll give the other side, because there are only two sides in life. The other side a little bit of political credit, because they frame this as quote unquote European orientation is the way they push it. who's not? It's kind of like the Clean Air Act, the Clean Water Act. Who's not for clean air? Who's not for clean water?
Yeah.
They know that the majority of Macedonians actually do want to join the European Union, as sclerotic and decaying as it is. But so they frame it in that, and who's not for being a member of the European Union? Well, VMRO has clearly said. I think the Macedonians have clearly said, yeah, we want to be a part of the European Union, but not at the price of our name, our identity, our dignity, our culture, our history, our language. All the things that make life worth living.
Yeah.
So anyway,
there's going to be some grand gesture. I'm sure somebody will be put on a blacklist. Maybe Zaev, maybe somebody from VMRO again, maybe somebody from DUI like to make a gesture to VMRO. And then there might be some major concession from the US. I heard, it's like a very weak rumor that maybe some kind of a visa liberalization with the US might happen, or maybe the UK. Something like what the Bush administration did to get us not to vote on the municipal border law when...
right, 2004.
When Struga and Kičevo were made majority Albanian artificially. So
Right.
we were told, we had the Bush recognized us under the name Republic of Macedonia. And then only a few months later, we realized it's all a hoax. The US is still pressuring Macedonia to change its name. It's not taking our side against Greece, as we were led to believe at the time. But the moment passed, and we voted, not enough people voted against this border withdrawing, so we lost 2 cities to the Albanians, thinking we've won the name dispute with Greece, and then we lost the name dispute with Greece.
Right.
They might do something crazy like that now,
Yeah.
or
Well,
they
we'll
may
see.
not bother because there is not enough. Why would they? Because the government is so obedient, and the opposition does what it can. But
Not enough. Yeah.
probably, they don't. The US maybe doesn't care that much about the EU anyway. What's the worst that can happen after? Let's say we do not amend the constitution. Albania begins accession talks with the EU. We don't. Albanians are saying that this might make them more restless than usual, like more aggressive. We move toward some kind of soft partition after this, but Kosovo is heading for a partition anyway, so it might be like what the State Department has in store for us anyway, because if Kosovo gets partitioned, it's not like we can survive much longer.
Yeah, I'm not so sure about that, for the simple reason that Macedonia is a NATO member country. If it were to be partitioned in any way, shape, or form, that sends a signal to the U.S. major adversaries, China and Russia, which would then take advantage of it in whatever way they can. So I'm not entirely sure of that. I mean,
No, but soft
I think
partition, like federal
soft
units,
partition.
like the UK will have like Wales or Scotland in the Albanian parts, and their own parliament, their kind of like prime minister, their own maybe currency. They already have the flag, an anthem now. I mean, you can increase.
That's true.
yeah.
The UK is a founding member of NATO, I believe.
Canada has provinces. The US has states. A lot of NATO members have like different forms of federalism in them.
True. Yeah. Well, no matter what, any advancement towards that does not end well. It's not going to end well in the countries that you've just mentioned either. So it takes a long time. Well, it's I'm reminded. What's the Hemingway? I think it was Hemingway, or was it F. Scott Fitzgerald? I think it was Hemingway. How did you go bankrupt? Gradually, and then suddenly. How did you fall apart as a country? Gradually, and then suddenly. So, but let's not end it on a morose note like that. Instead of Hemingway, let's quote T.S. Eliot, who reminded us that there are no permanent victories and no permanent losses. So it is always a fight, one way or the other. And sometimes we win, sometimes we lose, but you're constantly fighting for what is right, what is true, what is just. And that's the same here in the United States. That's the same in Macedonia. And despite all of the things we've just talked about these past 45 minutes or so, the fight doesn't end. And it requires eternal vigilance. And so those who love Macedonia and those who want to see Macedonia and Macedonians succeed have to be vigilant and have to keep up the good fight.
Hear, hear.
All right. That's a good way to end then. We are not ending on a note of crushing morosity, or we are ending on a hopeful note.
On an endless war.
That's the history of mankind.
Or what will never be ended.
Endless war. That's the history of mankind. So that's another subject for another podcast.
That's the best we can offer at the moment.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's do this. Let's reconvene in 2 weeks or so and see where we are.
Yeah, we might have a lot of movement by then.
Yeah, with the constitutional amendments and the whatever the U.S. is trying to force on Macedonia again. So
things will be happening.
Yep. All right. Good talking to you, Cvetin.
Okay, buddy.
Take care.
You too. Take care.